Hey everyone, welcome to the Veteran Cancer Talk. I'm your host Casey, and I have the privilege of having a Army veteran, Tom or Thomas, whichever he prefers today, wants to tell his story, his battle, his struggles with his cancer. And Tom, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to finally talk to you. We've been sending emails for it feels like a couple months now since you started your new treatment option for your cancer. And with that, can you please give me a little bit more background about yourself, your service, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I enlisted as a reservist um, when I was a junior in high school and went to basic training in 1990. So I was a reservist for about 13 years, and at that point decided to go re-enlist into the IRR. So, and so that's what led me to eventually to Iraq. So about 2 years and 4 months into that IRR enlistment is when I got called up. So I was basically on a 2 week road trip out west, and this is before I was married. Long before I was single.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got home, my landlord had kept this box top of mail, and so I gotten home early in the morning on like a Saturday morning, and so I wake up later and I start going through that mail, and there's this thick manila envelope from the Army. And I was like, what is this? And because I was used to getting correspondence from, I would get like a point statement or a retirement point statement or a notification that my physical was out of date. But this was unusually thick. And so when I opened it, I got the shock of, it was orders. And it said, Sergeant Firak, you're ordered to active duty for a period not to exceed 545 days in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Oh wow.
And so, that was the shocker there. And so, once I digested that, I'm like, wow, I got to tell my friends and family. And, I had told my parents the next day, and my mom was hysterical. Like she was jumping up and down on the bed. And it's weird because I thought to myself at that time, I go, well, I'll know how she reacts if I get killed there. And so once I had finished with that, I went into the backyard. I needed, a few minutes, and I'm like, I wanted to call, an Army buddy and just, hopefully commiserate a bit. But, I should have known better because I called up my old platoon sergeant, and, those guys had kind of warned me about the IRR call up. And I had researched it, and it looked like they were looking for like medics and engineers. And I figured, oh, they don't need any commo guys, So I get him on the phone, and I go, Steve, I've been called up. I got orders in the mail. And he pauses for a minute and then just starts laughing. And I should have known because soldiers have such a dry, humor. And, in between laughing and catching his breath, he says, and you know what? He says, send me a postcard from the Sunni Triangle. And so I was like, oh my God. But anyway, so November 16th of 2004, I leave home, and it's weird. I followed footsteps that I had traversed going to basic and AIT. So I'm back at Fort Jackson where I did basic training 14 years before. And they had us on a small National Guard post that they were renting, that the Army was renting, called Camp McCready, and it was to bring back IRR soldiers. And so I spent about 3 weeks there. I was there till December 2nd, and it was weird. I mean, there was all sorts of people there that had gotten called up, and there was this old woman. I think she was a helicopter pilot. She was a grandma. There was people there that had broken arms. They had just sent these orders out hoping anyone would respond. And the interesting thing I found out later was that, they didn't ever send it certified mail. So a lot of people threw the orders, they tore it up and threw it in the garbage. And no one was ever prosecuted for that. They never sent MPs to come and drag you out of your house, but I mean, I felt duty and honor bound. I looked into, hey, do I have to go? Is this, they're like, yep. So after leaving, we did like an abbreviated basic training there, rifle range, and they put us in the gas chamber again for whatever
Ooh,
reason.
did I?
I know.
I enjoyed the gas chamber when we were going through it because you got your buddies there and all that stuff. But years later, you're thinking about it, man, that burns your skin, your throat, your eyes. What could that do
Yeah.
to you later on long term? No one's did any studies that we can find about the
Oh
gas chamber.
gosh, I never thought about that. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty brief period, so
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, I mean, you think back in the past, you're like, what could have caused, my diagnosis? What was I exposed to? And that's something I never thought about. But so, yeah, so after that, I wound up on a Greyhound bus with two other soldiers that were there with me at Camp McCready, and then we went off to Fort Gordon.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, dude. Speaking of Fort Gordon, I did my comm school there because the uh, the Marine Corps, always sends their comm people over there. At least there's satellite communications over there. Small world.
So it's weird. I had been there, 14 years before, so it was just this retracing of steps. But I didn't really do a whole lot there. I mean, uh, the one odd thing is, we got stuck there for Christmas. They the entire post was a ghost town. Even all of the AIT soldiers were allowed to go home, but they were so worried, like that if they let us go home, we wouldn't come back. I think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You definitely would not just come back after a good holiday meal and all that stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I was there, and I befriended two other soldiers there, and so I was there until the day after Christmas, and then I got my assignment. I was assigned to the Mississippi State National Guard, the 155 BCT, and we were there at what was it, Camp Shelby near Hattiesburg, until we left like mid-January. We flew over, and then we were in Kuwait at Camp Buring for a couple weeks, and then we convoyed north, and I was at Fob Cal Sioux, and that's where I spent. I was a prison guard there at first, like I was shift NCOIC, and we took over this tiny RDF from the Marine Corps that was running it at the time, and I was there. We were there February 1st until December 20th, and of course, they had a
Mm-hmm.
burn pit there, and so that's it's weird. Like my recollection of the burn pit, like I remember smelling it like it was this horrible smell, but it was like only like three times, like where it would really waft
Yep.
over, you know, where our tents were, where we were working. But then when I spoke to another soldier, he's a very close friend of mine, Captain Roth. He said, "No, Tom." He says, "I smelled it
Mm-hmm.
every day."
Yeah, it's like one of those things where you're in like a paint shop or something and you smell it over and over. It just kind of fades, like your body gets used to it. But a lot of people with burn pits, they just think, oh, it has to be active. No, it burnt. It's in the soil now. It's over, like coated everything. There's bits and pieces of it in the ground that we're kicking up all the time, and people don't understand that or even think about it because who thinks about it, right?
Yeah, whatever embers or ashes, and it wafts over, and that sand was so fine,
Mm-hmm.
that, so yeah, I never thought about that either. So
Yeah,
um
it's kind of like in my mind, when you buy a new car, you start seeing that car
yeah,
everywhere. As soon as you start thinking about it, the veil's been lifted, and now you're like pinpointing. I could have got something from here. I could have got it from here. Maybe we should have did something different here. To make people safer.
yeah,
It's a rabbit hole that I've been going down for years now.
yeah. I mean, I mean, I've accepted what's
Mhm.
happened to me, what's wrong with me, and you have that period where you're like, okay, why did this happen to me? I'm only 53 years old, you know, but you have to get past that so that you can push forward.
Oh, 100%. Like that is a great point. You definitely got to go through your time of let's say grieving. Why
Yes,
me? What can I do? Am I going to get better? The fear, the anxiety, all that stuff. You definitely got to process it and figure out a path. Okay, let's beat it now. And then after that, let's
right.
talk about it. Let's be able to help someone else.
Yeah, because you're a soldier, you're a Marine. You're like, okay, let's have a plan of action. So you're right. After you're done feeling sorry for yourself, what can I do? How am I going to fight this? You know, I think two of the best pieces of advice I've heard from other cancer patients uh, was to take things one day at a time. And the other thing, one support group I was in, there was a gentleman there, and he said that he only looks at positive stories and outcomes and things regarding cancer patients
Mm-hmm.
instead of that horrifying rabbit hole of looking at the worst case scenarios. Or the other piece of advice, don't even search stuff online because especially in the case of I have multiple myeloma, a lot of that information is outdated.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're looking at, it's not accurate. Like if you look at uh, multiple myeloma online, it's like, oh, you might have 3 years to live, but like that's not true. Like a lot of patients are living around 10 years now. So
Well, speaking of that, because that's phenomenal to hear that update. Can you go into a little bit more detail about your cancer? Like,
yes,
what is it? Well, you already said what it is, but what are the signs? What's going on that causes it?
that's a great question because so um, I'm lifelong Chicagoan, born and raised, married here. But at the end of the pandemic, my wife and I, we sold our house and we moved to the northern suburbs of Indianapolis. And that's, I mean, that's where I was diagnosed actually.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was I was anemic. And when we moved to Noblesville and I established with a new GP, he said, do you know you're anemic? And I said, oh, I guess. And thinking back, I think maybe my old doctor had told me that, but we never delved into it at all. And it would have just been some more blood tests.
Mm-hmm. Now, sorry, before we move on, is that with a VA doctor or a civilian doctor?
Civilian,
Okay.
yeah. So I've been working, civilian job throughout. I mean, I got out in 2006 after I got back. This Dr. Ray, he says, let's wait for 6 months and test again. I was still anemic. And then in May, or can say like the spring of 2023, I started experiencing a lot of abdominal pain and other things, which turned out to be like a little bit of fatty liver tissue. But I was going to these the ER, med checks, immediate care, and eventually that led up to a colonoscopy. And I thought, oh my God, this, I have colon cancer because you look up the symptoms and I'm like, oh, this stuff is matching. I'm anemic.
Mm-hmm.
There's only two reasons you're anemic. One is that your body is destroying red blood cells, which was my case, or you're bleeding internally.
Mm-hmm.
So neither are good, of
Yeah,
course. But
neither good.
so two things happened then. So I did the colonoscopy, and thankfully, when I woke up from that, my wife was smiling and happy. She's like, "You're fine, nothing's wrong." And so that doctor, she says, please go find out why you're anemic. And so I had made an appointment with a hematologist at MD Cancer Center, which is another just phenomenal oncology program, and that's where I was diagnosed actually.
Excellent.
And so, um, so I'm going for this gallbladder test, and I walk back into the parking lot, leaving there, getting in my car, and the hematologist calls me. And when I had first seen him, he thought, here, this is nothing. I asked him, I go, what's the worst case scenario here? Or what do you think it is? And he's like, what do you mean? I go, is it cancer? And he says, nah. And so the same hematologist calls me back with this horrifying bedside manner. And he says, Tom, we had some unexpected results. Your blah, blah, blah number is, off the charts. And I'm like, oh my God. And so my wife was so mad that he had put it that way.
Yeah, it's not easy to give people bad news. I'm personally, I'd much rather them be like, okay, this is what's wrong. Let's deal with it, instead of, oh, hey, let's tiptoe around this bush. So I get it. I'm glad I hope you took it well. Like, okay, now we can do something about it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was still panicked at that moment because
Yeah.
he said, we need to do a bone marrow biopsy, and so I wound up doing that, and that was positive, of course, and so yeah, I established with the MD Cancer Center and began what they call induction therapy, and it's 12 weeks of a 5-drug regimen, 2 of which are subcutaneous shots that you get daily. So I'm going through that, but at the same time, like that I'm being diagnosed, we've decided to move back further north, remain in Indiana. So I'm buying a house, changing jobs, and moving. And then later that summer, my dad passes away. So like there was just a point where I felt completely out of control. Like I didn't, even know. I never felt that helpless. But thankfully, once we had a plan in place, and I realized, okay, hey, we're going to do stem cell transplant at the end of all this, and so, and it's weird because I'd accepted this position with a company up north, and I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have the diagnosis yet. And so I had to go back to them and say, hey, listen, I'm an Iraq War veteran. I was just diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to have to do this treatment and this and that, and I'll be out. And they still took me on. So, so, and then, the other thing, the whole reason I wound up in Indiana is for veterans benefits, because I had like just a 10% rating. And any rating in Indiana, your kids go to a public university for free. So Purdue, IU, Ball State,
Really, just for 10%?
Yes, any percentage.
Wow,
rate.
that's something I didn't know, and I'm a VSO of Florida, like a veteran service officer. I can help people, like guide them through claims, what they could think about doing. I can't do it for them anymore, but I can still guide people. But 10%, that is a big boon for veterans, to go over there, because I know in Florida to get that kind of benefits, you got to be 100% permanent total, or very close to it.
Wow, PNC as well. Yeah, yeah. So, and it was one of my wife's friends who's 20-year retired Army veteran who told us about that. So I do buy a home, and we move up north. I'm only like 4 or 5 weeks into the induction therapy, so I'm up north here and having to travel back, once a week to Indianapolis. But thankfully, that same my wife's friend, retired Army, she's like, you can stay here, and so I leave work on Wednesday nights and drive down there. I do my treatment and come back home, and then I transition to Northwestern. So
okay, before we move to Northwestern, because you got a different type of treatment there, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct.
So
yeah.
what was besides having to drive back and forth, what was your day-to-day life like? As soon as you stepped in, what was that experience like, getting that treatment?
At MD?
At MD, yes.
Oh, they were great. It's weird because like when I went to the first appointment to see the hematologist, I walked in there and I didn't realize it was like a cancer center too. And I was looking around and I'm like, oh my goodness, all these poor people have cancer. And I thought, oh, thank God I probably don't. but then, of course I was diagnosed, and then like I'm spending, week after week there, but they were really great. Um, it's weird. One of the drugs that you have to take, what is it? Not Revlimid. I can't remember now. Like this is one of my side effects is brain fog and chemo brain.
Yeah. Hey, if you got any side effects, we would love to hear it because that helps the next person understand this, and so they're not having to
Yeah,
Google it or trying to get different informations for your ailment.
I think it's called lenalidomide, um, and it's a very toxic drug. It was the drug that pregnant women in Britain were given during the 50s, and it turned out they had all sorts of miscarriages and whatnot. But actually, my oncologist led one of the studies using this drug to help treat multiple myeloma, and it was a huge breakthrough. But I just remember getting that drug in the mail, and it says you have to handle it with rubber gloves. You should wash your hands immediately after touching it. And like if touching it is dangerous, what is putting it in your body?
Oh man, that's crazy. So your regiment was pills. Was it pills or infusions or a mixture?
Both.
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 Gotcha.
Yeah. So I remember like the the one drug that lenalidomide that came in the mail, and it's weird because my family had moved up north already, but I stayed because I think one of my next infusions was going to be in a few days. So like, here I am. I'm in the empty apartment we're renting. I have an army cot that I'm sleeping on, and I'm all alone, and it's like, and then I get that pill and I take the first one, and it says, you could have a stroke and all this. So I'm on that. I'm on a dexamethasone, a steroid, um, and I think antivirals, and then the two infusions. It was Velcade and Darzalex, which are very commonly used to treat multiple myeloma.
Oh wow.
So
So at this point, what stage do they give you as a diagnosis?
that's a good question. I multiple myeloma is a little different. They stage it, and I was at stage two, because I had a high risk factor. So I had a deletion of what's called P53 chromosome, and it helps. I think it's like has disabled a part of your immune system, so it predisposes me to remission, coming out of remission quicker, or being able to attain it in the first place. I finish my induction therapy, and then it's on to the SCT, uh, stem cell. Yeah, see, brain fog again. Um, SCT. Anyway, so in preparation for that, the SCT, I have to do a stem cell collection, and so that's done at Northwestern. And you sit in a chair, and they hook a line into your carotid artery, and then they do the collection, and that one takes 2 to 3 days. And lucky for me, at the end of day 2, I spike a fever, and they're like, "You have COVID."
Oh, great.
And
Yeah.
so,
Holy crap.
so it negates everything we've done. They kept those stem cells still, but they've never used stem cells from someone that was, currently positive for COVID. So, so I spend a week in the hospital there. They give me one of the medications that helps with COVID, and I didn't have any issues really. I'm released, but this is pushed back the time frame for my stem cell transplant, and I have to do the collection again. So I have to get the line put in again. And so I go through that. We get our 20 million stem cells successfully. And then I think the day after Christmas 2023, I go and I check in at Northwestern. And then the next day they give you the stem cells, and it's just a drip from a bag. It's very, anticlimactic almost. Um, it's not like other cancers where they're doing a surgery and you're knocked out
Mhm.
and you're under the knife and then you wake up and find out this is just a drip. And then before they give me that, the first day they gave me this huge dose of chemo to wipe out my immune system
Mhm.
because they're rebuilding it from scratch. So
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, this kind of procedure is mainly taking your own blood and filtrating it to a workable, renewed type of blood, right?
right, right. Yeah, they're well, okay. So what they're doing is they're collecting stem cells. Before the collection process, I have to give myself a series of subcutaneous shots with a drug called Granix, and so it just makes your body produce like 10 or 20 times more stem cells that are in your bones, to begin with, and it causes this horrible bone pain. And I experienced it. I had these waves of pain and pressure
Mhm.
throughout my whole body, and it just, oh my God, it was so bad at one point. I called the number and I said, what can I do? And they're like, you could take some Claritin, or, that was about it.
Yeah, yeah. There's really not much you can do about the bone, especially if it's just pressure. I know this from experience, so not like yours. Yours is 100 times, but because of my high dose steroids through my chemo, I have avascular necrosis in both hips. So I got blood like pockets or not dead pockets, in my bones. So I get that pressure too. Just I can't imagine all over your body. That is wild.
It was, I couldn't do anything. And so my wife said, why don't you put a heating pack on? And I said, okay. And I put it like on my chest, and miraculously, the pain subsided.
Wow. Good.
So
Awesome.
that's the first go around. And it's just like, oh my God, I had to give myself 4 shots every evening. And it's just because of the way the doses were. They're pre-filled subcutaneous shots,
Mhm.
but just especially after a couple of days where that this thing you're injecting yourself with is causing the pain.
Oh, of
So
course.
so that so that's the first go around. And then, like I said, I tested positive for COVID, so I have to do this process all over again.
Oh
More
my.
Granix shots.
Now, sorry. Speaking of the shots, is it just like you have to do all 4 shots in a certain area, or you have to mix it up, in different body parts, or?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it in your thigh. I chose the belly.
Mm.
4 different spots there. Usually.
No, is it easier to do the belly? Because I know people that are like low testosterone or steroids and stuff. They do the belly is the go to. Is it just easier or less painful?
I think it's easier, especially if you're self-administering, because you can just
Mm.
like really quick. I mean, someone could do them in your backside.
Oh goodness, I rather just not get poked anymore. I'm done.
I know. I'm used to it now. So the other thing I just remembered before, you were talking about staging.
Mhm.
So when I first saw the oncologist at MD, he's like, we caught this early. So this is a very important point. Many myeloma patients, their first symptom is extreme bone pain, because a myeloma, as it progresses, causes lesions in your bone, holes in your bones.
Mhm.
And some people will be diagnosed and they have dozens of these, or 50 of them throughout their bodies, riddled with these lesions. And they have a break in their bones. Like I read one story, a woman had given birth and she had this horrible back pain, and she just thought it was, from the pregnancy. It didn't go away after 6 months, and she got diagnosed that way. So luckily for me, I only had like 2 lesions. So, which, have grown and shrunk as I've gone in and out of remission, or as we've done the treatment. But I had the high risk factor, so thus stage 2. So
Yeah, well, it's so different cancers have different stages. What is the max stage your cancer is? Or sorry, what would be the worst stage? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2?
I guess 4, just,
Okay.
um, like I said, they don't talk about staging too much because it's odd. Well, they talk about staging like I'm going to be restaged. So there's restagings of it after. So like after you do stem cell transplant or CAR T, I'm going to do a series of scans, MRI, PET scan, and another bone marrow biopsy. And after that, they'll see how active the disease is. I mean, I assume I'm still a stage 2, I guess. There's just that one number, my light lambda, that I, that's the one, that I'm looking at every time, the results coming in my chart. So, and the scans.
Gotcha. So you've touched on your 2 different treatment plans, or have we not got into
We
the
haven't
CAR
gotten
T
the CAR
yet?
T yet. So yeah,
Okay, because that's a new emerging one,
yes,
or
it
newer
is.
process for your cancer from my research. So
Correct.
you're at Northwestern, you're getting that good treatment. Can you tell me about this?
Okay, so I got about a year out of the stem cell transplant, a year remission, which some people get 10 years, so that was disappointing. But we did a scan, and they're like, hey, there's some lesions coming back, and then the lambda number had been creeping up, so I wasn't that surprised. So they gave me some more of the the Velcade and Darzalex. That knocked it back, and then they backed off of one of the drugs, and it was still creeping up. So they're like, okay, it's time for CAR T. So CAR T before was only given after you had like failed like 4 lines of treatment. But they have found that the sooner you give CAR T, the better. You get more remission out of it because your immune system hasn't been as beaten up by the other treatments. So, the CAR T is a very effective one. You can get years of remission out of it. So, on the CAR T, I did another collection similar to the one for stem cells. Line in again. Only 1 day, though, of collection. So pretty simple. And then I checked in on April 6th this year. And I was, the week before I was, or the days before I had 3 days of chemo, not the heavy doses that I got before SCT, but they're not wiping out the immune system. They're just trying to knock it down a little, So on the 7th, I get the same as before, just the drip of T cells, and then it's just wait. So the number one side effect of this therapy is it's called cytokine release syndrome, CRS, and you can spike a fever. So your body becomes incredibly predisposed to inflammation during this period. So, and the fever will spike. It will at a certain time, and I think for me it was like 6 days. So and it didn't go too high, and then they managed it, and then actually in 2 days I was ready to go home. So and which in hindsight, I wound up, I go home, and then like 2 days later I have a fever. And so, they give you this little card to keep in your wallet, and it lists all the side effects. If you have any of these, you're supposed to call in immediately. And, with CAR T, you have to live or be staying within 2 hours of the hospital. So, if you're from out of state or you live in some rural area, you're staying here, or a lot of people simply don't do the procedure because of that too. So I have a fever, it's above the 100.4 benchmark. So I call in, and the other thing is I had like a gout flare up too. And then I had tooth pain up here, but I think just all inflammatory things, because like I said, your body's predisposed to inflammation. So I go in, and I go into the ER, and then they check me back in to the Prentice Hospital, and I spend, they do all these tests, like, okay, they have to make sure it's not an infection or of some virus I have. So all those tests come back negative, and I'm allowed to go home again. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm back home, and I was having more side effects. I had like some numbness on my triceps, and then what else was it? I had more bone pain, not throughout, like because of the Granix, but it was like in my upper arms, my back, in my neck, and just terrible pain. And I would fall asleep for like an hour and then wake up, and I'd be up for 3 or 4 hours, and then you know fall back asleep, get some fitful sleep, and that lasts for a few days. But then I wake up one morning, and I'm first thing I do is I go rinse with mouthwash, and I'm trying to swoosh it around, and I noticed that like that action is a little difficult, and I'm like, what's this, and so I have an appointment, a scheduled appointment the next day, and I tell the nurse practitioner, and they're like, well, Bell's palsy, it's a possible side effect. That's probably what it is, but we're gonna check you in again to the ER because we have to make sure that you didn't have a stroke. So it's like facial paralysis. So this side of my face was drooping a little,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd had so many scans. I'm like, I doubt I had a stroke. So
Yep.
so I get another MRI and it's negative, and
Yeah.
so
Wow.
yeah, so
That's nuts, man. Just all that. So you're already on a couple failed treatment plans. You get on the CAR T, and then the side effects gives you another ailment that you have to deal with. That's nuts. That's freaking nuts, man.
yeah, yeah. But I've been doing PT for that, and it's better. Like I couldn't do this before. Like if I tried to smile, this side was, so that's come along really well. So, and
Yeah. If you didn't say anything, I couldn't see it. I think PT is going very
yeah,
well. Like
it
yeah,
is. Yeah. And I couldn't talk, that's why, I had said before, let's
yeah.
wait a little while because I would have been,
100%. That's your health is best.
yeah. So that's, that was for the most part, the side effects. It's strange because, I've communicated with a lot of people, through Blood Cancer United, and and they have like mentors, and so I speak with this gentleman named Daniel, and he's had both the therapies, and he's like, and everyone told me this, they're like, hey, CAR T is not going to be as difficult as SCT, but you know the stem cell transplant really did weaken me, and it took me a few months to recover slowly, and I slowly got my strength back, but I didn't have as many side effects with that, and this CAR T
Mm.
is, but it's doing its job, I think, so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for where I'm at. I'm healthy. Like right now, I'm pretty active. I'm going to be going back to work in June, late June. And right now I'm able to get 10,000 steps. Like it's exercise. There's like four pillars of
Hmm.
of of things that I live by here. Like exercise is one, right? You have to get enough exercise. Diet,
Hmm.
your mental health, and what's the other one? And just correct proper rest, because those things all greatly impact your immune system.
Yeah, you're completely right. Some of the things I've done since I went into remission is I limit sugar. Exercising a lot more. I could do a lot more, but my wife and I are about to do a 1,000-mile bicycle trip in less than 14 days from North Florida to Washington, D.C. So we've been training for that, for this cancer awareness ride. And sleep. I'm horrible with sleep, but I've been trying harder. I go and lay down earlier. I try to wake up a little later. It's rough. And mental health, you definitely got to get some sun. You got to get outside. You got to move. You got to definitely get into a happier zone to stop all the stress, the worrying, and all the anxiety behind any of this, or even in remission, worrying about scans coming up or anything. You definitely have to just. I love your 4 pillars. I think those are solid, and I'm glad people are going to be able to hear it.
With mental health, like one thing I struggled with early on was like I was so worried about what was going to happen. Like my blood pressure was spiking, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna, have a stroke and die from this before. And it was just hard to get that under control. Like I was telling you
Mm-hmm.
earlier, like I never felt so helpless, and that was part of it. Like just and then you're taking your blood pressure, and it's worse, and so that that I had to get under control, and thankfully did. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Like a lot of people just spiral. A lot of people spiral because they stay in their head. You see the results, and who in this modern age doesn't get a scan or a test and then go to Epic or go to the VA website and look at their stuff before the doctor can have a chance to contact you. So you're already in your head when you do that. But
yeah,
it is
the
what it
stuff
is.
populates,
Yeah.
it populates into my chart or Epic, and you're like it's hard not to look at it.
No, yeah, for sure. I know from my previous scans, I'm like checking it like hourly, refresh, 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 just to see the numbers as fast as possible.
So one thing I had noted here that I wanted to share for sure. So like I did get a 100% rating for multiple myeloma from the VA before it was a presumptive from the PACT Act, which that changed about, I think it was less than a year ago.
Yeah, yeah. The PACT Act is a phenomenal gateway for people to be presumed or presumptions of their certain kind of cancers. Did it go far enough? In my opinion, no. But uh, if people are listening to this in the VA, this is what they do usually. If you have an active diagnosis, they will grant you temporary 100%. I don't think that happened in your case because you already got it all filed. But in anyone listening to this, if you are active uh, treatment right now for cancer, you get 100%. You just got to apply for it, and then it will be reduced after you're in remission. You're clear for a certain amount of time, and then you can claim the secondary conditions.
That's what yeah, I was told. Like I didn't get P&T. They said they'll reevaluate for active disease in 5 years, but this is never going away. I mean,
No.
it's always gonna. So that's fine. I'll deal with that when the
Mm-hmm.
time comes. Uh, another thing I would add before I talk more about the disability is, if you're a veteran and you're anemic, you should look into that immediately. You know, like don't ignore that. Because that's could be, you know, I mean, nothing would have been done. So it turns out that I'd been anemic since 2018. Or I think I mentioned it earlier. With my old GP in Chicago, but they just wait. It's what's called smoldering myeloma. But now, the studies and technology, I think they are talking about treating some people with smoldering myeloma with Darzalex. So, so yeah, if you're anemic, you should have, look into it. So, and then as far as a disability claim, I had a really good VSO, I think, here in Crown Point. And so I had a document, DA form 2170, it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It's this right here. And I believe this document was key in my approval because, like a week before I left Fob Kalsu, everyone interviewed with a doctor and they asked you what happened and then, how do you feel now? And, and at the end of that, I was given this form. And at the bottom line of this form, and this is really incredible, it says, service member was deployed to Iraq. Service member was subjected to continuous operational conditions and exposure to human waste, indigenous plants and animals, composite material fires, petrochemical waste and fumes, gases, fumes and dusts of unknown origins, continuous loud noise exposure, and airborne pathogens. Service member may have been exposed to infectious diseases to include, but not limited to, the following: leishmaniasis, tuberculosis, hepatitis, malaria. Service member was also subjected to extreme exposure to sun and ambient temperatures. Personal hygiene with non-potable water was conducted throughout service members' 1-year deployment. So like that's a horrifying laundry list of conditions, right? And so it would be a surprise that, and I think that document, I would implore every veteran right now to dig through their files and pull that out if they have it, because that'll be the one overwhelming piece of evidence to use in any disability claim. And I believe it's the reason that I was approved.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah. This is the first time I've heard of a veteran with cancer actually present that document, because I know not everyone's offered that document. Like, I've never seen that document, and there's been older veterans I've talked to that's never seen that kind of document, because they're struggling to find a link, a nexus back to service of why their cancer could have happened. And it is a struggle. The PACT Act definitely did a good job in trying to help, but there are so many other cancers that are still out there. And if they had that laundry list, it's scary, and I don't want to see it, like the whole list of what I could be subjected to or what I was, but it could definitely help someone if you have it. So like you said, I hope every veteran can locate it or request it or see if they have it and really put in those claims, or at least start getting early cancer detection testing and get ahead of it.
Yeah, I went to, before I was diagnosed, they had some burn pit clinic at the VA in Brownsburg, Indiana. And I was like, I might as well, just go get a screening and all. So I think that was at least recorded as well, and I think they verified that, you were at a forward operating base that had, burn pit. I mean, they all did pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. You throw a rock at any base and they had some kind of burn pit or some kind of pit with something, maybe not burning, but waste and all that stuff. They had something going down. But man. So we talked about a load of stuff today, but some of the key stuff I wanted to ask you before we, get on or get done is, you said earlier you had a great wife as a support. What other kind of support did you have, and what other suggestions or suggestions to the caretaker of how to deal with someone that is going through something like you've been through?
I mean, we've had help from friends and neighbors. I mean, there's times where my wife and I have been in appointments, at Northwestern, and needed someone to help pick up the kids at school. I mean, logistical stuff like that, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I mean, if people offer, hey, whatever you need, take them up on it. Don't be shy about, I mean, it is a lot of logistical things, because here, if a spouse becomes disabled or sick like this, it's like all those things that they're taking care of at home or working, right? They can't do. So like someone needs to step in, and, whoever is willing to help with, little things, or fixing something at the house or whatever.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. You bring up a phenomenal point. It's not these big grandiose things that people can do. It's a little bitty day to day, maybe like, hey, I'll bring you over a cake or something, or I'll help, pick up the kids, or, hey, I'll stop by and just to hang out. Those little small things really add up way more usually than the big thing, like a big grandiose thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've been lucky in that, I mean, I've had the 2 treatments, but I've been able to bounce back quick enough. So I haven't really lost a lot of ground, so to speak. I've at least been able to be at home and still kind of take care of business and balance the checkbook and do all that stuff. So
you haven't been put out too much, but okay, dude, that is phenomenal. I'm glad stuff is starting to roll, hopefully in the right direction.
Yes. Please.
So one of my last questions is a young vet comes to you and be like, what is your biggest advice for me starting this journey? I was just diagnosed. What would you say to them?
I guess, gather as much facts. I think, the number one thing would be, get to a good oncology program if you can. I mean, it's difficult. Depends what your insurance is. For me, it was never. I was never in doubt about, I want to go to, Northwestern or MD or Rush. I wasn't, I was not gonna, I'm in the VA system, but I would rather, get the care from Northwestern, because I mean, I could get some oncology from the VA, but when it comes to the larger procedures, they would, I would wind up somewhere else anyway, because they don't do those. But yeah, I mean, you want the best. You want the best. You're sick. Your kid's sick. Your loved one is sick. You want them to get the best care. So that I would do that, and do your research. And then definitely file those claims. Because if you're not going to be able to work, where's the money coming from? And the money, the money I've gotten from the VA
That's a good point.
has been very helpful. So yeah, I mean, get the best care you can, and make sure you file the claims. I think claims are going through a lot quicker, because I filed another claim for PTSD, and I mean, like within weeks it was approved. I mean, before, the backlog was like months and months, and you had to be very patient. So and I guess the other thing is dig through that paperwork. Every time I remember, the best piece of advice I got from whoever gave it to me was like, you keep every piece of paper the Army gives you, especially medical stuff. So that would be another piece of advice. If you got that folder tucked away somewhere, go dig it out and look for that 2170, or look for anything, sick call slips, or anything that, you can use later as, anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, 100%. You are dead on the money. Very wise words to share with other people. But Tom, I think that was a great spot to kind of pause on this one. And I thank you so much for coming on, being open enough to share your journey, your experience, your ups and downs, and really just giving great advice for someone else probably about to follow in your footsteps or down this horrible road we call cancer. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Nice to talk to you. Nice to meet you.
You too, brother.
Okay. Take care.